Welcome back to our second half of the complex and program project management. So we're going to continue with Jeff Manhardt, talking about something that no one else has ever done before. So I'm kind of interested in hearing this whole story. So Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it. I'm looking forward to chatting with folks today. And yeah, it's very exciting to share a couple of things that we did at a bank I worked at that the organization had never been able to complete before. They attempted a couple of times before, but never got there. We'll show what we were able to do and how we got there. And just for folks that are coming back from break, we were talking about this picture here, and T asked me kind of jokingly, is this AI generated? And the answer is yes. It is AI generated on purpose. I asked it to create an office setting with uh, with different tones and genders, and I asked it to be as if someone was focused, the team was focused on a thing, and so you'll see that. And it looks really good. If I created this image a year ago using, a couple of the technologies that were available then, I would have seen, fingers not look right, or sometimes awkward stances not look right. I think this one did a really good job of doing what I asked it to do. There's two things that I noticed. One is the paper in the woman's hand has an unnatural wave to it. And the woman right in the center, her thumb should probably be showing in there, even in that little space there. So otherwise, fantastic work. And an example, like John was saying, of how to work with AI. And to do that in a way that enhances the work you're doing, not to take away from the work you're doing. And so what I'm going to share today is two projects and how we drove success in these complex programs. We'll talk first about relocating a data center. John talked about how data centers are on the rise. The company I worked for, we built a data center from the ground up. So I'll talk a bit about that. And then enterprise platform transformation. And we'll talk a lot about data and some of the pieces around that. Along the way, I'll describe the leadership strategies for managing these intricate projects and programs, because it's important to think through how we're going to lead. I think, as we talked about earlier with Nicola, she mentioned that leading is different than managing. And I'll describe some examples of how we led in these programs. First, a little bit about me. I am currently the Senior Director of Citizen Intelligence, which means I spend nearly all day, every day in the artificial intelligence space with generative AI tools and citizen development tools, meaning you can create your own agents, you can build your own applications, you can use and work with AI in a way that changes fundamentally how well you do your job. And I think one of the things that John described was that it's going to be important to think about the way we are working with AI and leveraging it to the way it can affect how we do our work. Uh, I love the project management space. John, you and I'll talk afterwards about how we can compare notes there. In addition to that current role, I have been in the past a PMO director at two different companies, a project and program leader, and we'll talk about the two programs today, an acquisition specialist responsible for when our company acquires another company. I've done 11 of those in banking and in food service. And it's been an amazing kind of role to be able to see how we can bring two organizations together and to lead that effort as well. Another complex program, if you will. I'm also an adjunct professor here in Buffalo, New York, where I am, and have served on the board of PMI Buffalo, along with serving as its president. I'm currently a vice president of the board of Habitat for Humanity here in Buffalo. Great organization that helps generate wealth, and helps do that uh, through homes. And so I'm really excited to join you and talk about a couple different programs. And I'll start with the data center relocation program. This is one for me that was really very exciting. It's an opportunity to build from the ground up a place where we have all of our technology, our routers, our switches, our servers, our applications, all the things that make an organization run technologically. And in doing so, we moved from the data center we were using to this new data center we were building. And as an overview, just kind of give you the starting point of what that complexity looked like. That's 37 move events. Each of those had a 10-week schedule attached to them. Each required tailored change management. We also categorize these events into big events and little 10 events that help us understand and plan for the risk, the command center components, and focus comms. And along the way, we recognize governance is one of the key things that's important. And so we created those change requests with a change approval board that we met with every 2 weeks to go through this effort. I'll show you a little bit about what that timeline looked like. We also recognize that there are different types of leadership styles. We're going to get deep into this later, but situational leadership is a leadership style I feel provide the best style to help with this project and program. It helped the project managers lead these high risk events directly. And then we allowed our technical owners to lead those smaller events and adapting the leadership to the event complexity and risk. So let's dive in a little deeper and recognize this first program of projects was a waterfall based way of working. I share that because it's important to recognize the way that we worked in this effort. We had to do some things before we could do other things. We had to be able to build the data center before we could put things in the data center. Right. And the next program of projects, I'll talk about how we leverage the agile way of working and why we are able to use that there. But here, let's talk a little bit about the why. Nicola mentioned that the why is a great place to get started. And I think that is exactly where we started here with this effort. We recognized we had aging hardware. We had a whole bunch of complexity about how the hardware connected to each other, how the applications lived on top of that. Some of those applications were frail, kind of using a technical term, where they had a lot of complexity to them. That one wrong move would cause the entire application to fail. We had applications that were tremendously valuable to our end users and had to be up and running at all times. And so we had to think about how to address that. That meant we had to rethink traditional migration techniques. We couldn't just say, hey, we're going to take this server down or this group of servers down, and the application just won't be able to work today. We had to think about different ways of working. And in this case, we had thousands of virtual servers that lived on dozens of physical servers. And that allowed us to think differently, build a set of physical servers in our new data center, and use virtual techniques to virtually migrate the data instead of physically moving the servers. A great way to reduce downtime, and to the point where we were able to move those servers real time while people were using them. Right, this technology available to do that was available to us at that time, and was allowed us to reduce risk and actually reduce to zero the downtime for those specific applications and servers. And in addition, we had to recognize it's important to do thorough testing. And that is to ensure that as those components move, they work in their new home. Sometimes it's address changes, right? IP addressing, DNS addressing, those kinds of components that had to be repointed in this new place. Sometimes it was simple cabling, make sure the thing is plugged in right, that had to be tested. Right. So we had to go through all of those pieces. That helped explain the why we put the effort together for this program. The second why was around the business value. Sure, we had aging hardware. Okay. We had spaces that were at high risk. All right, those are good technical reasons. The business reason was the recognition that we could reduce operational expenses and optimize our resources by building this new data center and relocating to it. I'll talk a little later about some of those pieces, but think of this way. When we created our new data center, we were able to design it from the ground up. That meant we were able to think about heat and the way the heat gets displaced. And we actually came up with a solution that was patented in the data center technology world. We also thought about improving the infrastructure that allowed to boost the operational efficiency. And we thought through the strategic growth, recognizing that as we were able to build this new data center, we were also enabling the business to grow into the organization it wanted to be. Remember, we grew by acquisition. So being able to have the space to grow aligned with those strategic business goals. And so the way that we spent time defining our scale and complexity is to think through the criticality of the systems that we were migrating. I mentioned before, some of the systems couldn't be down. So let's think of it this way. We're working in a banking space, and the systems that are running the ATMs are on the hardware we have to move. We had to think about how are we going to move those without removing your ability to go get money out. Right? So we had to think about how to do that and build components in place to allow us to handle those critical systems. Another one that came up as we thought about business continuity measures was recognizing that a mainframe, big piece of iron, big piece of hardware in the banking space where all of our accounts are on, your checking account, your savings account, your mortgage lives in a lot of banks in this mainframe. And we had to physically move that big box. We thought about what would happen through risk analysis and risk planning. What would happen if that big box came into trouble as we went to move it? Maybe it gets damaged while it gets put on a truck. Maybe the truck gets into an accident and the box gets damaged. Maybe someone realizes that there's data on that mainframe that is valuable and they hijack that truck, right? All of those became risk factors, and we started to plan around those risk factors. And we could bubble wrap the machine, we could double lock it, we could have a police escort. All those were great thoughts. We also said, is there a different way? And so, similar to the discussion I had a moment ago, we leased another mainframe, put it into our new data center, and copied the data over the wire, and then sold that old mainframe. That allowed us to remove all of that other risk and ensure we had business continuity. And then we also spent time recognizing we had multiple teams from across business and technology. Remember, at the time, I had a little over 1,000 IT people that I was working with and 2,000 business folks that I was working with across this program of project. And we had to coordinate all of those cross-functional teams closely to ensure that we executed smoothly and efficiently. So I'll give you a real timeline here. And also, this is a real picture of our new data center. Something interesting you'll see as these boxes are here on the right-hand side, those are all server racks where we put our servers in. But you'll see right above it, it looks like some clear plastic. And this is an example of the thought process we put in to how we handle heat. We would cool the air under the floor. That's a raised floor you see, the white floor there. And we would remove the tiles under the server racks. So the cool air came up through the floor and the hot air rose into the ceiling and built a recycling process that allowed to handle the heat and the cooling that way. In our previous data center, we cooled the whole room. So all that white space, that walking space that you had for people to move around the data center, all of that was being cooled when it didn't need to be. We actually went from cooling 100% of the space to less than 20% of the space. And think about the cost savings that came about with that. So we did some construction with flooring cracks, which are the air conditioning units that are used in data centers, server cabinets, all those big server cabinets you see there. We built a command center with the full functioning components that included design for security and displays, and even a kitchen for those folks that we had to have working on a 24/7 shift. Then we went through preparation for the move. That was that 10-week process I talked about that included the physical and virtual servers, application mapping, because not, if you think about the way applications live, for those people that are in technology, you'll know that one application doesn't live on one server. It lives on sometimes dozens or multiple servers. And in many cases, if an application is a database or other components, you may have one application that connects to the same 5 servers that another application does. And so a lot of mapping of complexity there. Then on that move day or weekend, those 37 events I talked about, and we would go live from there. That go live included testing, validation, and yes, fallback if needed. And we did on 2 of our little tent events out of the 37. We got halfway through, things failed, and we backed out. That's also something to think about. You always have to think about the risks as you go live and how to address them. So, diving a little deeper, we spent a lot of time thinking about energy. In a data center, most of your costs are in energy, whether it's electricity to power all of those servers, or it's the air conditioning solution, or it's the backup systems to those. And yes, we did have backup systems to both electrical and cooling. That included things like heat wheels, DSCs, this battery of bank you see behind the screen here, that is the battery bank that was used for uninterruptible power sources that allowed us to ensure that if the power got disconnected to the building or something happened where there was a shutdown, the servers could continue operating on this bank of batteries until the backup generator started. And so there was a continuous set, and that required a lot of energy efficiency. We spent a lot of time thinking about the ongoing monitoring and adaptation to the cooling strategies being dynamic. And I mentioned before, we have a patent, and that patent was 2 factors. All the things I talked about before, but 2 distinct factors. One was every door was a refrigeration-like door. with insulation and air gap control. And the second was we used the cool air outside to cool the air inside. As long as we had 50-degree or cooler weather, we were able to cool our data centers for a fraction of the cost because we use the outside air. And I mentioned before, I'm in Buffalo, New York. That means that outside of July through September, we have 50-degree days. Those other months, yeah, that means for 4 months, we're a little bit warmer than 50 degrees. For the rest of the year, we're 50 degrees or colder, which means we were able to save all of that energy. So super exciting effort, and I hope I shared enough there to give you some excitement about how the complexity of that effort was. Next, I want to dive a little deeper and talk about our second program. It's called EPIC. We called it EPIC because it's the enterprise platform for insights and customers, and it was doing something even larger than that data center program. The data center program uh, had 4 different projects that were leading underneath it, 37 events, a few thousand servers. All those things are true. It took about 18 months to get done. This effort was consolidating our customer data from multiple sources. And when I say multiple sources, I mean 44 different sources of data, whether it was an application or it was a database or it was your the information from the teller machine, how many times you pulled money out or put money in. All of that is data. Not only did we have to consolidate it, we also had to think about how to make it available for our teams to use. We had to develop rich analytics that, after combining with the diverse data set, allow us to improve our customer understanding and insights and better be able to support you as a customer. Right? So lots of complexity here. Let's dive a little deeper into it. By creating this single source of truth for our customer data, we are able to consolidate those multiple sources into a centralized platform for unified customer. Matter of fact, we had to define what a customer was, because in many of those systems, we defined a customer different. Sometimes we considered a company a customer, right? If a business is working with us, that business could be a customer. The primary holders of the accounts could be separate customers. They could be personal customers, meaning they have their own checking or savings account. They could be part of a mortgage that is a joint spousal relationship, another set of customers. They could be a guardian for someone else, maybe through a notary or some type of power of attorney, different type of customer. All of those customers we had to map, model, and merge into one space. We did that with a why in mind, to help us improve data accuracy. Centralizing these data sources helped us remove those inconsistencies and enhance the accuracy and reliability of our customer information and create that space to have detailed customer analytics. So now if you think that scenario through, and I say to Mary, a customer, I can now see, by doing all this work, that Mary is part of a business. She's the account holder on that business, and she transacts as that person. She's also part of a marriage, and that is a customer. So she's connected to other people there, including family members. And she also is a power of attorney for her mother and that customer. So now we can connect those dots and also connect the dots to other pieces of Mary's life, to her family, to other components, all with 2 factors. One, know your customer, which is a government requirement. And 2, your ability to opt in. So Mary saying, yes, I want the ability to connect these dots. and I want you to be able to help me with my money situation in those different aspects. So let's take a gander at what that schedule looks like. I showed the data center one a moment ago. I only showed you a very high level view of that, partially because I wasn't allowed to show you the rest of the detail, et cetera, proprietary things that were going on. This one I was allowed to share. A lot of acronyms on here, so that's somewhat on purpose. But think about what we see on this complex program of projects timeline. From left to right at the top, you'll see we started in 2016 and ended in 2019. And so nearly 3 years worth of work. You'll see the work streams included 4 separate programs of projects within the overall program. And then within there, all those components are separate pieces, some of them projects, some of them components of projects. And at the top, you'll see that we had a program level view as well that made sure we thought about estimates holistically, that thought about the security framework holistically, a business glossary. Data is all about understanding how we leverage the data. And a business glossary says, gives us the ability to say, this name field not just means Jeff Manhardt, but it means it's connected to the data field over here that says Mr. Jeff Manhardt, this data field over here that says Jeffrey Manhardt, this one over here that says spouse of Jolene Manhardt. So the business glossary was really important to pull together. And then you'll see organizational change management, or OCM. We specifically thought about and integrated organizational change management into the program of projects on purpose to show how we needed to be able to work with the folks that are going to use these new components and help them be aware of it, right? Have the knowledge of it, have the desire for it. Right? I want this change. Have the ability to be a part of that change and to reinforce it along the way. That's why you see multiple views of organizational change management. To get deeper into this program, that second section down was all about the data. We'll dive a little deeper into how much data we're talking about in a minute. You'll see that it was the long pole in the tent. We spent a lot of time. It was really a complex effort going through the data, not just our own data, but data that was included in other projects and programs as well. That included external data sources as well as internal data sources, and then building in data quality along the way as well. The third one down was our sales and marketing platform that we built on top of the data to leverage that data to help us understand that as a customer, if you are doing research on our website for mortgages, great. We want to be able to help support that. And so we would leverage that data to help us reach out and share more information around mortgages, or maybe put you in touch with a mortgage specialist. And so we have a lot of rollout there, weeks of time across those releases. Then you'll see the last one. We needed a tool to be able to visualize the data, to be able to take all of that data and make it usable for our business stakeholders. And we spent a lot of time figuring out what that tool was. And in this case, we chose Tableau. And you'll see at the very top, the second quarter of 2017, we implemented Tableau, and we went live through the following 27 weeks across multiple releases to help that effort move forward. And that's a good point there. All of these are releases because we leveraged an agile way of working as we went through this work. We did that because things could change, and we had the power to change them. The business team members and product owners had the ability to choose what was the next set of priorities to go do. We used 3-week sprints and we combined 3 of those sprints into a release. And so you'll see in a couple areas, 4 releases or 8 releases. We'll talk when we say 8 releases, that means we had 8 3-week, uh, 8, 9 weeks sprints, right? 8 times 9, 72 weeks as we went through that workout, as we went through those rollouts. So we were able to leverage Agile to help us prioritize the work. All right, let's go into our next slide that takes the next step. So yes, we had Tableau, our data mart migration, our data aggregation. Those were all technical milestones. But also, take a look at this Venn diagram. I mentioned before, this program of projects was called Epic, right? That right-hand side of the Venn. And we had the integration of 44 different applications, including all the ones you see there, an MBK and an ATM and a BPS, right? All of our acronyms for our applications that we had. But then you'll see 3 other programs of projects that were running at the same time, leveraging data. The Enterprise Profitability Program, or the EPH program, or the Risk and Regulatory program. So myself and those 3 other program managers needed to also stay in sync because they would have their own data. Enterprise Profitability needed BBC data, EPH needed LIQ data, and Risk and Regulatory needed FXS data. But in many cases, we needed the same data. And so you see right there in the middle, CLN and ILN and FLP. All of us needed to data, and all of us needed to match, model, and merge it to in a way that was going to work for our programs. It was a lot of work. Some cases it was existing, right? Someone may have done it before me. Maybe enterprise profitability got to the FLP application before I did. Great. Some of them were new, those green colors that were all new to all of us. And some had existing sources that we had to add data to. So tremendous complexity through this effort. And all 4 of these efforts were going on at the same time. So I mentioned before the marketing piece, we monetize these insights and help strengthen our brand by targeting our marketing strategies. Instead of saying to all of our customers, hey, do you want a mortgage? We're able to look at the customers who may be looking at Zillow data, or who are looking at our website, or have come into a branch and said, I would like to know about mortgage information. And we can target those folks. We're able to enhance our customer engagement because we know more things about you. We know Mary has a number of accounts across different areas, and we're able to leverage that when we're talking to Mary about how we can help her. And it leads to revenue growth and brand leadership. Now, I'll tell you something that you probably have heard if you've heard other bankers talk. Bankers want you to be sticky. John mentioned before, AI companies want you to be sticky. And one of the ways that the banking industry knows that if you have more than 2 accounts at a banking institution, right? Maybe you have a checking and savings. Checking and savings, you can usually move around, look for the best value, look for the free toaster or free gift certificate. When you have that third one, whether it's a bond or treasury, or maybe it's a mortgage or home equity, all of a sudden you become sticky. It becomes harder to move between banks. And we love that stickiness. That helps us with revenue growth and brand leadership. So I mentioned before that I would tell you a little bit about the depth and breadth of this effort. The EPIC program tracked 239 features across multiple work streams. And we built this dashboard to specifically help us keep track of it all. There's a lot to keep track of. And also to help our stakeholders know where we were in the process. I mentioned before, this was a 3.5-year effort, but some of the data was available earlier. And so we helped people know where we were in the effort through this view of the data. Some like Tableau was done very early on. And so we were able to complete that and have people use it with the data they had before we had all the rest of the data in place. And by reviewing this on a regular basis, we were also able to allow our product owners to pivot and reprioritize when needed. That embodied situational leadership. I'll give you a quick example. We were going through a technology called Teradata and spent about 4 sprints working on that set of technology to put our data into and store, match, model, merge. And we learned a little bit into that 4th release that it wasn't going to be feasible to do. Lots of reasons for that, a lot of technical reasons, a lot of business reasons. The reasons didn't matter at the end of the day. We just could not use that technology anymore. We had to find a different one. We ended up finding Hadoop as a technology, and that took about another half a sprint or half a release, excuse me, to go through. So we spent all of that time and we had to pivot. We made the choice to pivot rather than just living with a technology that wasn't going to work for us because it was the right thing to do for the program and for the business. Lots of unique challenges and unprecedented activities in this one. I mentioned at the top that no one else did this because there were actually 2 other efforts that went on before this program to try to handle the work of this program. And they failed. They failed because there's a lot of constraints in our legacy systems. When we try to pull data together, it was very difficult to do, or extracting data out was very difficult to do. Proprietary data sets in older systems made them very hard to connect and to collaborate. And so we had to think about innovative approaches and found different ways of working with those legacy systems that got around those constraints. We had tight timelines. Now, you may say to yourself, you had 3.5 years. What's a tight timeline? It could have been a 10-year effort if we didn't focus on every moment. One of the reasons why Agile was so effective for us is because we worked for those 3 weeks, that sprint, and we were focused on just that work. While as a program manager at the release level, I was thinking about holistic release train analysis. Our teams were just focused on those 3 weeks that allowed us to focus on those tight timelines. And that ensured that we spent time being cognizant of our time and our priority setting. We also had to leverage adaptive leadership. Now, this program of projects had about 1,500 people that worked on it from the beginning to the end. They interchanged throughout the time, depending on the scope, scale, and complexity of the effort. And in some cases, they were on for the whole effort. Some cases, they were only on for 3 or 4 weeks. And we had to think about how to adapt to that. In addition, there were over 150 people that they were new to the organization, had to get injected into the projects. They had nothing, they had no knowledge of this project. So we had to think about how to adapt our leadership to the new people, in addition to those that have been on the effort for a long time. The last one I'll mention in terms of adaptability is to recognize that we had a number of teams that were still working in a waterfall way. Like their team structure was waterfall based. We were coming in with an agile way of working. So we had to think about how to be adaptive in that way as well. That required a lot of robust management practices, not leadership specifically in this case, management practices to ensure that we were coordinating, problem solving, and delivering on those innovative solutions, the governance components, making sure that we were blocking and tackling correctly. Right? I'll stop here to say, I talked a minute about how we manage a moment ago. And earlier I talked about the leadership styles that are really important. And I think it's important to describe that here. Situational leadership is a different way of leading teams. It's specifically focused on leading in the moment and leading the people or person in that moment. What is the right style at the right moment for that person? That's really difficult to think through. I may need to focus on a participating style or a delegating style based on the circumstance. Right? If we're in an emergency space and we need to make hard choices, I may say, this is the answer, using an authoritarian style. We may be in other areas where we need everyone's input and we want a participating style. Or I may say, I'm not sure what the right answer is. I want you to go solve it. I may need a delegating style. And so situational leadership is focused on understanding the situation, understanding the people in the situation, and choosing the right style at that right moment. So spend a little more time getting deeper into that, adapting that leadership style to our team readiness. It also isn't just, I'm going to use this style with this group of people and use that same style every time with this group of people, because that group of people are also changing. At the beginning of an effort, I may have to have a way of uh, giving a style of motivation, style of excitement, style of the the world is our oyster. The possibilities are endless, right? That motivational style. In other cases, I may need to focus on the here and now because we have a very specific problem to solve. And we need to dive deep into that. Need a different style. So assessing those team capabilities along the way of the program of projects, not just once, but along the way, helps us figure out the right styles to use. And then being flexible with our leadership approaches to make sure we have the right balance of direction and support based on the team's needs. And then also focus, as I mentioned, on motivation and productivity throughout the program lifecycle. I'll give you a quick example. We were in our Agile team. We had 5 teams working at once, and one of our teams was remote. And we would celebrate our releases every 9 weeks with that team getting together with other teams in a central place. And we would come and we would have lunch and all those good things. And we kept buying pizza for these things. And one of our retrospectives, the third or fourth release in, got a huge group of people saying, no more pizza. And so we were really productive, but we took our eye off the ball of being of how we were feeding folks. And so we had to think through that, go with wraps the next time. Okay. As we synthesize all the things that we talked about for leading complex programs with situational leaderships, it's about an adaptive leadership style, assessing our team's readiness, risk, complexity, and adjusting the style between directive and supportive. It's also about leveraging the right governance structure for the complexity of the effort. In our case, we use change approval boards, dashboards, and intake teams to ensure we had alignment, transparency, and accountability. I think Nicola said at the beginning that communication is critical. It's 90% of what we do as project and program managers. And so it makes sense that we focus on that, whether it's above us, below us, or side to side. And then the strategic vision. We always had to think about the forest through the trees. That allowed us to anchor each initiative and demonstrate the power of situational leadership in achieving our transformative outcomes. And so you've heard 2 already. The directing style focuses on the clear guidance and task instructions to achieve those immediate results. We're in a crisis situation. I'm going to give you guidance, go solve. Or coaching, where we're going to combine that direction with supportive feedback. And that helps the team develop the skills and motivation intrinsically for themselves. Or supporting style that emphasizes the relationship building and encouragement to foster team confidence. And the last one is about delegating, right? We're entrusting the tasks and the decision-making responsibility. And then when we got into each of the sprints, we spent a fair amount of time in that delegating space because the team chose what uh, features and what user stories to take on for that next sprint based on the direction from the product owners in terms of priority, based on the technical assessment of the work, based on what they believe they could take on in their work and the velocity of their teams. So we leverage delegating effectively in those sprints. All right, this one's a little off the side there. Adaptive leadership style, maintaining momentum, driving results. I'll mention three other things that are important to drive success in complex programs. Something I haven't really talked about yet. It's the executive sponsorship. Executive sponsors providing vision and resources critical for the project's success and the organizational alignment are crucial. And I'll give you some examples. The program of projects that we ran for the enterprise platform for insights and customers was 40% over budget at the end of the effort. We knew that was going to be that way when we went from a 30% estimate to a 10% estimate. And when we did that work, we spent time with the executive sponsor, and that executive sponsor then spent time with the business stakeholders and the folks responsible for making decisions on funding projects and programs to ensure that the executive sponsor was able to sell the value of this effort. That paved the way for resources to become available, not just in that moment, but throughout the entire life cycle of the program. Tremendously valuable to have strong executive sponsorship. We've already covered ourselves in recognizing strong program management ensures that we have the detailed planning and effective risk mitigation throughout the project and program lifecycle. It helps ensure the success of the effort and proactive decision making. I say that because there are thousands of decisions you have to make in every project or program, and they're even more complex in those really large efforts, like the enterprise platform for insights and customers or data center relocation. This collaboration fosters a proactive decision-making and accountability, which helps drive successful outcomes. And then I spent some time helping to realize that we needed to have real-time progress visibility. That dashboard I showed you of the 239 features was just one of the 14 dashboards we developed to visualize the progress of the projects and programs to help ensure we understand the progress, the risk status, lots of risk management work there, and enabling proactive management. It was fantastic for providing clear communication to all of our stakeholders. Covered a couple of these already with governance standards in our project control committee, the strategic oversight, not just from the executive sponsors, but the committees that included those three other programs, the enterprise platform hub, the profitability effort, and the risk management effort. All three of those and the EPIC program created a strategic oversight that helped us align regularly across all of those efforts. And then we also focus on having strong quality and security compliance activities to ensure that we met those standards and we were safe throughout the effort. So to conclude the effort here, I want to leave you with just three things as you think about complex projects and programs. Adaptive situational leadership, effective leadership that adapts to the changing environments and guides teams through the complexity of the program. Strong governance. The right amount of governance for your efforts is valuable to ensure accountability and alignment with the strategic objectives and goals in these complex efforts, and a strategic vision. It's important to understand where we're going so that we're all aligned, and that it drives our impactful business outcomes in these transformative projects. So with that, I'll pause and to give it back to T and Anthony. Any questions?
Thank thank you, Jeff. Actually, we do have two questions if in the Q&A section.
All right, I'll
We take a
stop
look
sharing and I'll
forward.
pull that up. All right. What AI or other tools can be used to come up with the detailed program timelines? Yeah, I love this question. One of the things, these two programs of projects were pre-AI. I'll tell you where we would have leveraged AI for these efforts specifically is in Monte Carlo simulation, especially in our data center relocation effort, where we were a waterfall-based effort. We did a lot of our planning up front. We could have used AI to go through simulations of our resource and timelines that would give us a range of possibilities through both the timeline and the costs. And so we leverage it there. In our enterprise platform for insights and customers effort, we way underestimated the complexity of the data. And we could have used AI up front to get a sense for the complexity of the things we just didn't know we didn't know. And I think that would have been a great way of working with AI to help us in both of those programs. Second question was on building data center from scratch. Which four situational leaderships were best? All of them. There was not one that worked every single time. That's one of the reasons why situational leadership is so valuable and so hard to get right. And I'll give you a quick example. One example where I got it right in the data center effort was where we were working with our application teams, and I delegated to them, a certain group of them anyway, their own risk management. The teams that I did that with were well versed in their application, much more than I was. They had a good handle on risk, and they were strong in thought process or how to address that. So I delegated that work to them, and that worked out really well. I'll tell you where I got it wrong. I got it wrong one time when I was one of the times that we had to back out our little tent events was because we didn't use a directive style for a group that probably needed it, and I knew that they needed it, and I didn't do it anyway. A lot of reasons. Some of that was political. Some of it was just the noise that would have created, and I could have done that differently. So hope that helps there. Last question, how did you manage the impact analysis across the program? A couple ways. One of the ways that we did it as we completed features, we grouped those features into components. This is the Epic program to start with. We were able to group those features into business processes that changed. So maybe 30 features fundamentally changed this business process. As we grouped that, implemented it once, and then estimated or did the impact analysis on that using ADKAR, which is the organizational change management structure we use from ProSci to do that. And we used a couple of metrics. One was productivity, how many hours did it save? We also used it in terms of customer engagement. We were able to do that through surveys. And the third was, are we able to make better, insightful decisions? That was more qualitative and a little bit more, based on people.